and welcome to 79th Leadership News lecture on a very interesting topic, connecting the content as well as brand building. And we have Akhil Almeida, who's the head of marketing at Aegon India, and he comes with very illustrious experience. And before I hand over the platform to him, let me have the pleasure of reading out to all of you the kind of milestone that he has achieved and the kind of work that he has done, which I'm sure should inspire all of us. And he has done his studies, the basic studies from uh, NMIMS. Then he has done his master's, so that's MBA in one of the finest, supposed to be the Harvard of Asia, called as Asian Institute of Management, Manila, and between 2006 and 2008. And also he has done an executive education program from IIM Calcutta, sorry. And he has got, a lot of experience in terms of marketing, digital marketing, being both as an employee as well as a consultant. I think the biggest thing I think I should call out are three important things. One is his stint at Mahindra Race as digital general manager, corporate branding, where he was there for totally for 5 years and 1 month. After that, one of the finest consulting houses in the world, and that is a Cantor, and he was the vice president and head of digital practice, where he was again for 5 years and 6 months, and he has done phenomenal work there, which I'm sure he's going to share with us. And currently, he's like you said, head of marketing at Aegon Life, where he has been there for almost about 3 years now, 2 years and 8 months to be precise. And like you said, he's got terrific experience he's a seasoned digital marketer with 16 plus years of experience across media, that is OTT, e-commerce, tech, FMCG, auto, and BFSI. And he manages he managed multi-crore digital marketing budgets, has strong understanding of marketing technology, analytics, planning, and attribution tools, and he's absolutely agile also with data. And he's one of the most sought after speaker. And a great pleasure having you, Akhil. And sorry to disturb you on a Saturday evening, but I'm sure all of us are very eager to understand and learn from you in terms of how the latest trends as well as the content is concerned, and also connect the dots with the brand building. I think all of us have seen the content because everybody consumes content in different platforms, but I think the kind of sense that somebody can make out of this content for that we all of us get to see. Over to you, Akhil.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary, for that, really wonderful introduction. I mean, it's almost, I feel almost like you may have set expectations a little too high. But, I do appreciate you and the team for inviting me and, taking time out. And thank you for everyone who has joined in today on a weekend to kind of just hear my thoughts, where I'd like to share some thoughts about content marketing and how it impacts brands. I'm going to share my screen. And while I'm doing that, I thought maybe I'll just give you a little bit of background about why I chose this topic. So I started my first job, in the early 2000s. I used to work for a company called Virgin Records. Now, for anybody who's not familiar, so Virgin Records was the company that released artists in India like Aja Bhosle or A.R. Rahman. Internationally, they worked with artists like Coldplay. And for us at that point, really, the artists and the music that they were publishing, really, that was content. And at that point in time, we really didn't have a label called content marketing, but really what consumers were seeking at that point from labels like ours were things like was really the music that they wanted to listen to. And it's funny, as marketing has evolved, as digitization has kind of expanded, there are now new labels that we use, to term many of the things that we do in marketing. However, content type, I believe, has always been kind of at the front and center of helping brands, really differentiate themselves from competition. And when it's used in the right way, along with broadcast media, along with advertising, it's an immensely powerful tool in helping to establish real relationships that consumers have with brands. Right. I think from all of the journey that I've had, whether it was my first stint at Virgin, all the way through Mahindra, even when I was working with Cantor, the one thing that always kind of resonated regardless of who it was, the kind of customer that you were talking to, were stories told well. You can have all of the data in the world, right? You can have the best features. You can have your product and services can offer tremendous benefits. But if you're unable to communicate that in a way that's compelling to the customer that you are engaging with, they're not going to buy into your story, right? And this is something that you will find is common across every single category where customers, make transactions. So, from that perspective, storytelling and content becomes really important. And that's why I chose it as my topic today. I am sharing my screen. I hope it's visible to everybody. Dr. Chaudhary, you can just give me a yes on whether that's visible or not.
Not yet.
It is?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, one moment. Sorry, folks. Let me try resharing the content. Is it visible now? Is my screen visible?
No, we can only see your desktop, not the PPT.
That's fine. Is it visible
now?
now?
I can see. Now I can see. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Apologies for that glitch. So we can just jump right into it. So before I start talking about content, really, I want to take a step back. Okay, because anything that we do in relation to content really has an influence about, at the end of the day, why we doing content marketing or any marketing. At the end of the day, all of it really boils down to, basic brands and branding. And no doubt, everybody on this call has heard these words, many, many times. But I find even today, when I go into a meeting with my team or with my agencies, that these terms are that there tends to be a lot of confusion about what these terms mean. So I thought, let me just start with a quick explainer. What is a brand and what is branding? So a brand, at the end of the day, there are many definitions what a brand is. You can open any marketing textbook, a Kotler or what have you, or a Parmeswar, and look up multiple definitions of brand. But really, at its core, a brand is whatever your product or service stands for in people's minds, right? It might be an image that conjures up when they think of a brand that they like. Sometimes it's just a feeling, right? It could be nostalgia, could be some feelings of joy, right? Really, at its core, that's what a brand is. Branding is really the process of executing and managing the things that make people feel the way they do about your brand. Now, people sometimes confuse branding with the product. They also confuse branding with advertising. Now, while branding does include these, it encompasses much, much more. And the interaction that people have with your brand across all of the multiple touch points that are available, all of these interactions are an opportunity for branding. And when people think of branding, they tend to, equate it with advertising. Now, advertising is important because it's allowing you to inform your audience about who you are and what you offer, so that you can, generate interest in your brand. Advertising is also really key because it helps persuade people about what your value proposition is. So they are more likely to transact with you and therefore, increase sales for your business and your brand. Advertising can help, if they don't know you, advertising can help generate demand for your brand. And when it's done right, it can help to create real attachment as well as loyalty. Now, because of this, advertising and branding are seen as interchangeable words, right? And advertising tends to get also the lion's share of attention, both by organizations as well as agencies and sometimes by consumers. But the thing is, there are other tools, all right, in a marketer's toolkit. And sometimes these tools are underutilized, but they too also play a very important role in how brands are perceived. So, of the tools that are available, really the one that I'm going to focus on today is the role of content. So, so while advertising, focuses on pushing out a message to customers, the role of content is about pulling these customers in, pulling them in so that they can engage with the brand in various different ways. Now, you consider a brand's website or its apps or its social media channels or maybe its newsletters or memes that it's sharing, right, on WhatsApp or any other channel that you can think of. All of these channels serve as hubs from where content can actually be used to engage audiences and try to start building lasting relationships with them. And today, I believe when it comes to marketing, brands, and branding, we are really at a tipping point, right? Now, what do I mean when I say I believe at no other point in our history, at least in the last 100, 150 years, have marketers been faced with such a challenge as they are today. Now, why do I say that? If you think about it, today advertising is coming at the consumer almost like 100-mile-per-hour fastball, right? Uh, Brands have become much more agile, they're much more creative, and they're also constantly seeking opportunities to place advertising in front of the consumer. But at the speed that which brands are operating, we are now beginning to test the limits of what people can see and also what they can react to, right? It's estimated today that the average consumer is exposed to anywhere between 4,000 to about 10,000 marketing messages in a day. That's in a single day, anywhere between 4,000 to 10,000 marketing messages. And of these, maybe another 2 or 3,000 are just seen on social media alone. So for organizations who are trying to grow their business, the pressure to push harder, the pressure to push faster, and to push for more, it's only going to grow because now we have big data, we have the Internet of Things, and now there's also this new thing called generative AI. And all of these are opening up opportunities for marketers to reach consumers, in very specific moments and in very particular ways. But we also need to understand that at the end of the day, marketing is not baseball, right? So marketers actually need to adjust. We need to take a little speed off the ball, and we need to acknowledge that diversity and fragmentation are actually things that are here to stay, right? These are it's because you have technology on one hand, agility and creativity working in tandem on one hand, and then you've got this increasing diversity, difference, diversification. All of these things happening almost in parallel. It's making marketing much more challenging for consumers to keep up with. Right? Now, as a result of this, all of this marketing is really being felt by the consumer. And as consumers today, right, we are receiving far more advertising than we have ever at any other point in time. I'm just sharing a few examples. These are the findings of a multi-country study that was done some time ago. It basically called out some things that I'm sure many of you have experienced in your lives already. 88% of people claim that they see more ads today than they saw 3 years ago, right? 70% of people say that ads are becoming much more intrusive. They're much more, and they're also becoming much more annoying. I remember when I was in my consulting days, former client of mine, she was a very respected CEO. She told me a story regarding her teenage daughter, and her daughter had started tracking how many times her viewing experience on YouTube was being interrupted by advertising. Okay? And it's important to kind of recognize that these are things that are happening, because when consumers feel overwhelmed, they tend to take action. So it's not surprising that today, when you look at, say Gen Z consumers, nearly 60% of consumers, 3 out of 5 Gen Z consumers today are installed an ad blocker in their device, right? Essentially, it's something that they want to advertising is something that they're trying to stay away from because they think they just see too much of it. And even when they don't install ad blockers, they are easily distracted. Just think of how many things in a given day are vying for your attention. You're looking at that small, 3x5 screen of your mobile phone in your hand, right? You're trying to consume some content. You've got an in-app notification. You've got somebody pinging you on WhatsApp. I mean, there's just a plethora of things, and this is just on the screen. Imagine what's happening around you in daily life, right? So when consumers, even if they don't install an ad blocker, they tend to get really easily distracted, and they prefer to multitask, especially when they are faced with ads that they don't like. Now, across all generations, not just Gen Z, but across all generations, we're beginning to see consumers are drawing firmer and firmer lines around the places where they find advertising inappropriate. And you only need to look at the rapid rise of online gaming and, and paid video streaming applications, where customers now have the choice to skip advertising altogether so that they can, get an ad-free version of an experience. Right now, with both the consumer behavior as well as the technology, they're evolving at a pace that's unprecedented up to now. So if you are a brand today and you are trying to stand apart from the clutter of all the marketing messages that are out there, differentiation becomes key. And despite all of the challenges that exist for a marketer, I think there are also massive opportunities. If you're a marketing practitioner, or even if you're just a student of marketing, there has never been a better time for you to consider becoming a storyteller. Now, why do I say that? We've all heard this thing, right? About stories have the power to engage, right? But one of the things that have always been hard to do is how do you quantify the impact? That's always been a bit of a challenge. But even if we look at the most basic metrics, we find that engagement levels for content, they're 8 times greater when compared to, say, display advertising. Now think about that. If it's 8 times greater, that's the difference between somebody seeing your message versus not seeing your message. Somebody being able to recall your message versus not being able to recall it altogether, right? And as marketers, we're spending advertising dollars to get that message out there. But what's the point if it's not able to actually hit its target, right? What if it's like that fastball and the person who is aimed at simply can't make contact? So, it's important that we understand that now we can look at metrics that allow us to measure how effective content is. And content today can play a variety of roles, right? But if you're a brand today and I'm sure you're working in marketing, there are so many different ways in which you can look at content. So I've broadly classified it into 3 areas, right? You have own content. Now, own content is basically content that is created and controlled by a brand, and it's done to serve a very particular audience, right? It could be a Facebook page for your website, or it could be specific blog that you've created. And I'm going to walk you through maybe a few different examples of what different types of content are. So for anyone who's watching this and who became a parent, say in the last 15 to 20 years, right, they may be familiar with a website called babycenter.com. It's one of the leading parenting websites in the world. It has something like over 150 million visitors every month, every 4 weeks. And what Baby Center does is it offers a wide range of resources for parents, including articles, videos, forums on topics related to pregnancy, childbirth, and other aspects of parenting. But that's not the only thing it does. Once you register on Baby Center and you enter the birth rate of your child, you get a personalized dashboard with information and resources that are tailored to your needs. I remember when my wife and I were expecting our daughter, Baby Center was a haven of really useful information. And we still rely on it today, even 6.5 years later, we still rely on it to track her development milestones. What most people who use Baby Center don't realize is that it was actually owned by Johnson & Johnson. So while it's an incredibly useful service for the parents, it's also a terrific resource for Johnson & Johnson themselves. Because by looking at what the kind of questions that parents are asking on Baby Center and the kind of responses, J&J was able to get consumer insights and also understand the evolving needs of parents and the kind of solutions that they're seeking. Now, this information is then fed back into the research and development team at J&J, because then it allows them to enhance their product and service offerings. Another example of content would be, say, something like the craft food and family. At one point, it had over a million paying subscribers, and like just imagine this was a magazine, traditional media format that people would actually subscribe and pay for, right, so that they could actually bring it to their home. But why do something like this, right? Well, the reason Kraft did it is because they realized that it was allowing them to engage with customers outside of the kitchen and outside of the grocery store. It allowed craft and craft products to become a talking point for home cooks because they would discuss recipes in person, online, on the website. And it also allowed the brand to become, it also allowed the brand to become more visible, right? At points where it traditionally would not have really been visible, right? So anytime home cooking was being discussed, there was a chance that, okay, fine, somebody would reference the Food and Family Guide, and talk about a recipe that they have read about. Right? If you look at closer to home, right, in our own country, in India, brands like ThinShort and Ditto, okay, they're using content to make financial services more accessible and understandable for everyone. They've really identified this space where they use simple jargon-free language, they use humor, and they use a good dose of storytelling to engage their audience. And as a result of this, they are building, a loyal following of customers who not only appreciate their informative and entertaining content, but they're continuously engaging with these brands, and they're actually going out and advocating for these brands. So while that was own content. So while own content, focuses on addressing a particular need. Branded content is really about how do you promote a brand. And we've seen different versions of branded content available. If you look at something like, the detergent brand Ariel, I'm sure many of you would be familiar with this campaign that they did, right? Which was called Share the Load. And the whole point of Share the Load was talking about how can we create a more equitable future for women in society. But they were doing it through storytelling. Right? It wasn't just a video, but it was also really the message behind that video, and people sharing stories about, how, how these instances were impacting their lives. Similarly, if you look at something like Dove's campaign for Real Beauty, it's one of the best performing campaigns in the CPG space. It's created a space for the brand to move beyond soap, right, and beyond superficial beauty. Similarly, this is if you look at something like Lifebuoy. Lifebuoy had similar success, but it had success with a very different type of audience, right? Because they use storytelling to drive home a message of personal hygiene and how that can impact or reduce the effect of child mortality in a country like India. Simply the act of washing your hands, right, can help a child reach the age of 5. It's a very powerful message. And for anyone who's interested in in Formula One like I am, you may have come across this Netflix show. It's called Drive to Survive. It's just another beautiful example of how branded content can have a positive impact on business. I don't know how many of you were used to watch Formula One, but I remember when I was growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, Formula One was all the rage. But in the last 10 or 15 years, it was seen as a declining sport that was only meant for elites, extremely male dominated. But the Netflix show, kind of helped to change all of that. Why? Because what the Formula One was able to do with the show is that they were able to humanize the drivers, and they were able to give fans a behind the scenes look, right, of what was happening within the sport. Now, as a result of this, Formula One has actually seen a surge in popularity. Like, who would have thought that you would be able to attract new Formula One fans from, from a video streaming platform, right? In a country like the United States, where Formula One has never even able to make a dent before that, viewership of Formula One races increased by 50% in just 1 year after the show premiered in 2019, right? And it's not just viewership online or viewership, but we're talking about actual ticket sales in the races, right? So there was a 40% jump in just ticket sales. What Drive to Survive has also been able to do is be able to help expand Formula One's reach into new audiences. Formula One today is no longer uh, just a male-centric audience. Uh, they're able to reach, I think the show's been translated into something like 20 languages, and it's being broadcast in over 190 different countries. And you have more and more women who have gotten, female consumers who have now gotten interested in the sport. So new audiences have been opened up because of the way that that Formula One has approached content. So we've talked about how content can serve customers, and also not just the customers' need, but also the need to promote the brand. But content can also do something different. It can create what's known as a branded experience. For anyone who's ever used, whoever tried to use, say, the Nike Run Club app, this is a great example of how content can be used to get your customers motivated. In the case of Nike, is to get them motivated to stay on track with their fitness goals. Now, like any running app that's available out there, this running app also offers features like helping you track your runs, helping you set goals, connect with other runners. But what really helps the Nike Run Club apps, what helps kind of sets it apart is the kind of content that it has. They have a wide range of articles, of videos, and podcasts that are just not just designed to help you run, but designed to inspire and motivate. And these content pieces, they cover a wide range of topics, whether it's tips about training, to tips about nutrition, to just stories of inspiration. And beyond just tips about running and nutrition, they've also created a gamified experience. So they're using gamification to keep customers engaged. Runners can now earn badges and rewards for completing runs and challenges. And this is kind of fostering a sense of community and motivation among users. And as a result of all of this, uh, as a result of all of this content and this gamification, the Run Club app has become one of the most popular running apps that is in use today, anywhere in the world. Right? So what have we learned so far? We've learned that we've discovered that content can be used to achieve a number of marketing objectives, right? Whether it is serving the needs of a specific customer, whether it is to promote a brand through storytelling, and it can also be used to create experiences that kind of extend beyond the core product and actually into the daily lives of the customer. Right? Now, as a marketer, your marketing objectives will kind of help you define the role that content will play in building your brand. One thing that you need to remember is that content is actually highly targeted and will create a real engagement with customers, but it cannot work in isolation. Content needs to be combined with tools like broadcast media to ensure that it actually reaches a critical mass if that content is expected to have an impact. Uh, an analogy that I like to use is like, if you are a marketer, consider that you are the star batsman of your team. You are standing there on the crease. In one hand, you have your bat, right? That's your content. It's precision crafted. It's capable of delivering those beautiful cover drives that engage and captivate the viewing audience. But cricket is not just about individual brilliance, right? Now you picture the non-strikers, all right? You have this non-striker, someone who's running fiercely but sinking with you, right? That's your broadcast media. It's complementing your every shot, ensuring that your performance reaches every corner of the stadium. It's making sure that you're able to transform those singles into twos and those twos into boundaries or sixes, right? So content is not just about the masterful shot you play, it's also about the rhythm. It's about the partnership with broadcast media. So whenever you're thinking content side, you also think, okay, fine, how am I leveraging the other tools that are available to me that can help me truly turn this game around? And when content is combined with broadcast media, we find that amazing things can happen. Across the marketing funnel, we have seen that branded content tends to have a much higher resonance and affinity with audiences compared to just standard advertising. Study after study after study has shown that exposure to display ads are driving, they will drive brand lift across several phases of the purchase funnel. And this is stuff that, many marketers will be familiar with. But the lifts for branded content, we find that they are expressively strong and they are outperforming display formats at practically every single stage of the purchase funnel. So when it's packaged correctly, content actually helps improve measures like ad recall or product recommendations, and also increases the actual purchase intent of the customer. And while there are many kind of formats that you can consider when you're starting to think of content, those formats could be things like blogs, to newsletters, to memes on social media. We find more and more often that video content is the most preferred sort of format especially amongst younger audiences. So, for example, Gen Z consumers show a much higher engagement for video platforms like YouTube compared to, say, Gen Y or Gen X, right? So, in that sense, as you're looking at as consumer behavior evolves, and if you're thinking of content strategy, really think about who is it that you're creating content for, right? If you're creating it for a younger audience, video needs to be part of that basket that you're considering as far as content creation is concerned. It's not the only thing, but it is an important element. Many of you would have, will be familiar with the idea of influencers and influencer marketing today. And really, this is where content, when it's used right, can actually benefit with the right sort of associations. Across the globe, even in markets like ours, we've seen that when brands and use content correctly and they tie it up with, say, vloggers, the food develop bespoke content for them. This sort of content is seen as more appealing and more enjoyable. The right sort of vloggers or influencers can actually give brands the perception of reliability. They can and any brands, when they're introduced in this context, they tend to be seen as, at least they tend to be perceived as more believable and more reliable. But it's important to remember that it's a very wide influencer ecosystem out there. So not all vloggers are the same, and different vloggers will move metrics by different amounts. So when you are thinking influencer marketing and how to set it up to amplify your content, you need to also think of how you're setting up your A/B tests correctly so that you can actually establish benchmarks for content performance. Having said that, when it comes to content, bloggers are seen as a much more natural habitat for the brand, when it's paired with the right content. And these branded messages are a branded message that's shared by a blogger or an influencer is more likely to be also spoken about and further shared with others. But the thing is, you should not look at influencer marketing or bloggers in isolation, right? I think what we've seen is that the impact of all of these campaigns, it's much more keenly felt when it's actually enhancing an existing above the line campaign, whether that campaign is on television or print or radio, right? It could even just be an outdoor campaign. But when it's combined, then it's almost like 1 + 1 is not equal to 2, but 1 + 1 is equal to n, right? So bloggers will give your brand the flexibility to express themselves in new and relevant ways to your end customer, but at the same time, they also need to be supported by the broadcast media tools that you have in your apps. But regardless of which bloggers you use for content marketing or influencers that you use, one thing that you should always remember, it's not just about A, I've created a blog or I've created a video, and B, I've got this blogger here. It's really, are you able to, does your content at the end of the day tell a story that is actually resonating with the audience that you're trying to reach out to? Right? And when you think about how can you create content or stories that resonate, really this is where the future of content marketing kind of comes in. Because now that we've understood what content is and the kind of impact that it can have on brands, let's take a look just for a few moments on how the field itself is evolving. So in prior years, marketers would tend to profile their customers on the basis of psychographics or their beliefs or their attitudes, as well as certain demographic information, as well as the kind of media that the media they consume and the brands that they use. But now, in the age of rapid digitalization, with big data, with AI, now we can leverage information that's gleaned from multiple sources. And by combining these different sources of data, we're not just understanding real world behavior, but also digital behavior, right? And if you are able to layer this data, right? So you've got your psychographic information, your demographic data, you've got media consumption habits, you've got other digital behaviors, transactional data, things like credit scores, right? Which tell you about the affluence of a customer. All of these different sources, and they're layered with maybe data from publishers, third-party publishers, either second-party or third-party data. You are able to move beyond just saying, okay, fine, what content might resonate with what kind of customer segment, but you are able to drill down to not just the specific topic, but also the specific format and the specific channel where this content is most likely to be be preferred. So as an illustration, when you combine all of these different elements, you can identify category skews. And these category skews can be further broken down in topics and channels and formats that's going to resonate with your audience. So uh, because my day job really focuses about educating people around life insurance, right? I've used a life insurance example here. So what you're seeing in this illustration is a life insurance customer uh, who might exhibit very specific preferences depending on the topic that he's consuming, right? And I have to remember as a marketer that when I'm talking to this consumer is not only looking at life insurance. Like all of us, he has different content needs, right? And understanding what these content needs are going to help me influence him more effectively on the channels where my content is going to be visible, right? So while he might prefer to get his financial news and information either from a specialized portal or news or blogs, and he might prefer that for that kind of content to be in the form of text, he might exhibit a very different sort of preference when it comes to video, and when it comes to say something like lifestyle and health related interests, because there he might be looking at much more video and much more image based content. So it's not just a question of a one size fits one saying, okay, fine, video works and therefore I'm only going to use video. It's about being able to identify what for your given customer, what is where do they skew in terms of their preference for specific topics, which media channels are they going to be using to consume that content, what format is most likely to engage them, and developing content according to that length. So kind of detail this out a little bit further, here's like an example that you can, that I thought that might be helpful. So imagine you have these two friends. They've like first jobbers. Maybe they've just gotten married. They're at that stage. It could be somewhere in the age of 27, 28. So now they're thinking, I have dependents. Now I'm kind of interested in thinking about buying life insurance, right? So they're both about 28 years old. They're both living in a big city. They're both salaried working professionals. So on the surface, they might actually look very, very similar. And many marketers would actually plug them into the same bucket and say, okay, fine, I know what message I'm going to put out for them, right? But their content consumption behavior is actually very different. So, for example, on the one hand, the person on the left might be thinking, all right, fine, I have not just my dependents, but I'm not just my wife and my child as my dependents, but I also need to start thinking about my parents who are aging, right? And I need to make sure that I'm able to save enough money, not just to take care of my parents, but also save money for my retirement. So in his case, when he's thinking about finances, he's thinking about, say, something like retirement planning is important for him. Versus the person on the right might be much more focused on, say, something like wealth creation. Maybe that's an area that he's really interested in. And the kind of content he's looking for is not art, it's not really a long form article, but he's looking for hacks. He's looking for tips and tricks that will allow him to become not just financially independent, but help grow his wealth. So the psychographics in this case do make a meaningful difference in the kind of content that you need to kind of develop, but also the channels where this content needs to be published. And regardless of what that content is, you should also understand that there are certain key metrics which can stay more or less constant to help you understand the impact this content is having. Right? When you're thinking of content, really think of what is the reach within the target group that you have, assuming your target group is well defined. Think of things like engagement. How much time are they spending with the content? If they are viewing your content, are they now aware about your brand? If they're aware about your brand, did the content have a positive impact so that they are now considering maybe engaging with you at some point in the future? Did they find the piece of content persuasive when they were looking at evaluating your brand versus others? So these are things that you need to kind of metrics that you need to keep in mind when you are thinking about content. Now, when you've understood it right now. Like, we have like a framework for how we want to, of how content can be created and content, can be measured. Uh, but at the same time, I think the question that comes back to all marketers is, how do I ensure that my content works? How do I make sure that content actually resonates with the audience? And study after study has shown that, emotion, it kind of remains central to content effectiveness. So whether it is joy or surprise or love or nostalgia, marketers today, they have a spectrum of emotions that we can tap into and leverage, right? The other thing next thing you need to start thinking about is, does your content provide relevant information to the customer? For example, if I go back to the previous example in the previous slide, right? The guy on the left is looking for detailed information, but the guy on the right, he might be just looking for something like finance hacks, 5 tips to become financially independent at 40. Right? That could be like the headline for the content that is for. Right? So the information needs to be relevant. The third thing you need to think through is, does your content meet a very specific need or aspiration, right? A person who is interested in wealth creation would be seeking very different content from one who is trying to understand just the basics of life insurance or the basics of savings, the basics of investment. Right? And finally, think long and hard about, who your audience is, right? I talked earlier about how diversity and difference have exploded, right? It's always important to keep that in mind, because if we don't, right, then we tend to put many different sorts of customers into the same bucket, and when we do content marketing or any other form of marketing, with regular advertising, we basically are met with the same sort of mediocre results, right? And we think, okay, fine, there's a problem with the tool or there's a problem with the creative. No, all of those things might be right, right? What you really need to spend time on is, are you defining your audience well enough, right? And are you thinking hard enough about what might actually motivate them? What is it that they care about, and how is the content that you're developing, how does it tie back to their own identity? So as we've seen, I think content can be an extremely powerful tool, but it also requires significant planning. But when it's applied in the right sort of manner, it can impact your brands in an extremely positive manner. So having said that, I reached the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time. So I'm open to taking it.
Thank you, Akhil. I think the content is absolutely, I think the canvas is absolutely big, I think right from the advertising and what does the psychographics and things like that. Absolutely interesting. And definitely you have a lot of questions, but let me take one by one with your permission.
Sure.
We have, in fact, 3 questions from Vaidya Prakash. I think he's seeking some interesting, solution kind of thing, maybe from you. And let me read out all 3 of them together. We have achieved a significant success in treating a dreaded disease called chronic pancreatitis using an Ayurvedic treatment protocol. CP has no cure in allopathy and brings substantial mortality. The findings have been presented on national and international forums. We received nearly 300 patients from all over India, while we are at a tiny place in Uttarakhand, connected by air, train, and road from Delhi. Most of the patients approach after going through success stories available at social media. My question is, how to increase the popularity? We are pioneer of evidence-based Ayurvedic practice, and that has brought Padma Shri to us in 1999 and a secure advice. And then the last question that he has, a follow-up question, is need guidance to popularize a promising Ayurvedic treatment protocol for chronic pancreatitis, which is a rare but fatal disease with no cure in allopathy and has substantial mortality. Thank you, Vaidya. Over to you. Long question, Akhil.
Thanks. Yeah, very detailed question. If I can, I was trying to keep a track of the different questions, but essentially one is, if I understood correctly, really this is a potentially breakthrough sort of innovation that has been brought to market. It goes after a very specific niche audience. So far, there has been recognition at least within the professional circle and forums, about the efficacy of this innovation, and there has been success on social media, right? And what we're trying to do is figure out how we can leverage this success and take it wider. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I would first of all, I think hats off, congratulations on the innovation itself. I think what you managed to do is tap into an emerging need today within India, especially when it comes to, and that movement is now moving away from looking for more holistic natural therapies and not relying entirely on allopathy. And that's something that I think we don't do enough of in this country. Having said that, I think you talked about using social media, and social media is great as an application, right? Where I would kind of ask you to spend a little bit more time is if you had took social media out of the equation completely, right? Imagine social media was not available to you as a channel today. What would you do? Would you go back to your customers or to the people who are prescribing these therapies to them and try to understand really how do they get their information, right? Who do they talk to when they are looking for information? Yes, there is a Google search, right? But when you're talking to niche audiences, there is the kind of information that tends to be available online tends to be either very thin, right? So when there's not a lot of depth. So I might be looking for something that is very specific to my condition, and I'm not able to find enough information about it. I can go to a Quora, or I can go to like some other kind of forum. But is it really answering the question that I have? And is my only recourse then to find either someone like me who's suffering from the same condition or go and speak to an expert, right? Really try to understand what is the customer's path to purchase, all right, or path to decision. How are they stumbling upon this as an alt? How are they even stumbling upon this therapy, right? Have they tried allopathy and they moved away from it, right? If they tried allopathy and they moved away from it, at what was the trigger? So when you are thinking content marketing, think about really what was the trigger for the person to even evaluate the category. Forget your brand. How do you insert yourself into those conversations, right? And who are the influencers there? The influencer is not necessarily someone who's on social media or Instagram. The influencer could really be could be uh, uh, somebody entirely different. Maybe an influencer is the guy at the local pharmacy. I am going to if you spend enough time at any chemist shop today in India, you will find that a good 40 to 50% of people come without a doctor's prescription and simply say, I need a medicine for this. I need a medicine. I need a medicine for fever. I need a medicine for a headache. I need a medicine for an upset stomach. Right? And whatever medicine is being recommended by the pharmacist across the counter is what actually gets picked up. Right? So when you're thinking of really the customer's path to purchase, path to decisioning, I want to really go back to that and start thinking, okay, fine. If that were the case, and I don't know your business well enough, but I'm saying if that really was the case, how do you use content then at that point to influence that decision? If you were to create, let's say I go to a regular pharmacist and I'm constantly asking him, I've got a rapport with him. If I need medicines, he sends me something. I sometimes I just message him on WhatsApp, and he says, and say, okay, fine, recommend me a medicine. I'm going to send someone to pick it up, or you send it to my house. I'm just give you an example. What if I could have content inserted into that content? What if there was a video? This is, hey, listen, you're interested in natural therapies. Here's this new thing that has just come out. Why don't you go through this, right? It's content that you're creating that's relevant for them. It's shareable. It's also being inserted at the point in time when they're actually considering it. It's not something that they're stumbling across on social media. Because yes, it's not like social media is a bad place to stumble upon things. I think that's one of the great powers of the channel. But at the same time, I think we rely too much today on algorithms to serve content to people when they right? And those things are not always, are not always in our control. So start thinking of your content a little, of your channels a little bit more expansively. Start thinking really about the customer. Always put the customer at the center. And once you define your customer really well and understand his part to purchase, you will be able to uncover which are the spaces where you can influence. And remember, an influencer is not just someone who's online. An influencer could be the guy across the counter. An influencer could be someone that I'm sitting with at a clinic. Just the person who's, if I'm waiting at the doctor's clinic, the person who's sitting at the reception or the compounder, whoever it is. Right? Think of those people also as the people who are influencing. I know it's not a straightforward answer, but I would urge you to kind of think in that direction. I hope that did answer your question.
No, I'm sure. Let me go on to the next one, Akhil. I think all of us would have seen big out-of-the-home advertising campaigns run by Apple Computer, right? And you would have seen that hoardings showcasing just a photograph, right? Nothing else, and they just a small fine print. It is taken from so and so, what do you call, camera by so and so, and they actually give the customer name. That's one thing you get to see, right? And then you have seen in our own homegrown thing, you have seen Amul, the butter girl. That's one. And similarly, you would see some companies where the theme supposed to be looking like, at least looks like, very constant, but then of course they keep changing. But then the standard seems to be the theme seems to be photograph that shape huge, like the out of the life, or the larger than life kind of thing. And then you have Amul, and then if you look at Tanishq again, the kind of advertisement that they have released over a period of time. Each one of them has had some very resonating effect. Some of them very controversial, some of them are very thoughtful. Either way, but I think they have done their homework, and therefore every time they come out with a fresh advertisement, so they come with some very thoughtful observations, a thoughtful research that has gone into it. And then if you look at the top 10 brands in the world from Interbrands, global brand, 100 brands, Akhil, you'll see the Amazons. Then you have Microsoft, you have Cisco, Samsung. Then you have Mercedes. The top 10 brands. Each one of them have their own stuff. Now, the point is that when it comes to the content marketing, right, is it a good way for, or is it advisable for someone or any company to think of a platform, or let's say theme, to be constant, and you can build on forever, but at least the people connect with the platform, the theme, and then you can keep building like Apple does it. Akhil.
So Apple is an interesting example because the example that you shared, Dr. Chaudhary, about shot on iPhone, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that people need to remember when they're looking at initiatives like shot on iPhone is that shot on iPhone has been going on for years. Now, it doesn't matter whether I'm an iPhone 9, iPhone 15, or iPhone 20. Shot on iPhone is an initiative where people who are interested in photography and capturing special moments can simply go to the website and look at all of the other community that has shared pictures that have been shot on iPhone. So essentially, you have converted a feature, a product feature, into user-generated content and storytelling. Right. So for anyone who's interested in photography, really shot on iPhone is something that's relevant to them. Right. And one of the first things that we think of when we think of an Apple phone, at least, besides the fact that it is a premium product, is the fact that it's supposed to have a great camera. Right. That's the customer perception. Right. Technically, there could be other cameras that are probably just as good or even better, but the customer perception is that this is if you want a great camera phone, the iPhone is the phone that you need, and people are willing to pay a huge margin just for that perceived benefit. Absolutely. But because of that, you also have to remember that shot on iPhone is not just a campaign. Right? When people start thinking about content, it is something that has been built over time for many years, and they have been extremely consistent with it. Right? Every brand that has been able to leverage content like this consistently over time as a representative of the brand. Remember, the difference between this sort of initiative versus just a campaign is the campaign will have a shelf life, and after some point, the campaign will go.
Absolutely.
Right? Think of the campaign as simply as here's the new whatever product, iPhone, iMac, iPad, or Samsung Galaxy Z, whatever, Fold, this, that, or the other. And there's a cool tagline attached to it. And once that campaign is over and the product is gone, that campaign is, you're not going to remember that campaign because you're on to the next product. A shot on iPhone is not, think of it, it's shot on iPhone, not shot on iPhone 15 or not shot on iPhone 13. They are thinking about really how you engage with the world.
Absolutely.
And they are allowing you to put not just the billboard, but you can go to the website and look at all of the content that other great, people who are interested in this. Coming back to your question about a platform, platforms become important if you want communities to engage. I think one of the best platforms that I have personally seen uh, uh, around marketing, and I didn't include in this presentation, but is by the brand Red Bull. Right? Red Bull at the end of the day is a very simple product. It's an energy drink. It's only an energy drink. There's not really much else in Red Bull's portfolio. Right? At least Apple has different other consumer products, but Red Bull is only the energy drink. But if you look at what Red Bull has done with their media house today, they are kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of how content can be served and made relevant to people. So anybody who's interested in an alternative sport today, whether it is, they came into Formula One just a few years ago, but before that, anything from bicycles to skateboards to surfing, anybody who was living a lifestyle where they were young, or they were looking at young people who are like, who have a zest for life, right? Red Bull was generating content for them. They have today a dedicated web channel. They have they've made some amazing documentary films covering athletes that most people at least in our part of the world would never have heard of. But for everybody who is interested in those sports, Red Bull is the only brand that they know, and that's the only brand that they consume in that market. So just think, how could you take a drink that doesn't really taste that good, okay, and is more expensive than say the average bottle pint of beer even, and there's no alcohol, all right, and make a multi-billion-dollar business out of that. They do it on the back of content. Red Bull's TV ads are extremely basic, if you think about it. That's because for them, they use television purely as a brand recall.
We have a few questions, so with your permission.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying we thank you. I think we are running short of time, so with your permission, I have a few more questions. So I thought I will go through each one of them. I think we have 5 more questions. Is that okay? Small questions.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a question from Mr. Gopal Krishnan. His question is, how do we address the challenge of low span of attention in the modern day consumers? Thank you, Gopal.
Okay, that's an excellent question, Gopal. And I think it's also a misnomer. Think of the paradox that we live in today. Okay. On the one hand, publishers, okay, advertising publishers are bemoaning the fact that consumers don't have good attention spans. But on the other hand, you live in the era of binge watching, where that same consumer, okay, is willing to spend, to stay up late night for many, many hours to watch content that engages. If there is anything, the low span of attention is directed at advertising. Because, like I said earlier, advertising is coming at them too thick and fast. There are too many messages, too much of the time. Not most of it is not relevant, and they're trying to cut to that clutter. So, in cases like that, the customer has developed almost like a mental heuristic. The minute he sees something that he or she believes is not relevant to them, their brain immediately switches into something else. This is not an issue of customer attention. This is an issue of brand irrelevance or message irrelevance, right? Because if I go back to the Drive to Survive, Formula One is if you think about it, it's just cars going around on a track all the time, and it's the same set of tracks every single year, right? There are not that many overtakes in Formula One. There are much more overtakes in MotoGP, which is a motorcycling equivalent of Formula, which is much more exciting if you ask me. But you have something like Drive to Survive, all of a sudden you're like, I'm getting under the skin of the engineer, the driver, the sponsor. Oh, this is so engaging. That's what's bringing people into the sport, right? And people are investing. I think they're 3 seasons old. They're into their 4th season now. 10 episodes roughly. So 40 hours of content have been consumed on Formula One, probably more than people are spending in a year watching Formula One races. So it's a misnomer. It's not that customer attention it's really customers become much more choosy, right? And all of us today are like that. If I see an ad today where I don't, which Even if it's my own ad, if I think it's not engaged, if it's not engaging enough, I will not. If I don't, it's not relevant enough, I will not engage. Right. So.
Absolutely. Now, this is a question from Mr. Monish K. Mohandas, and his question is very curious to know the branding strategy to be adopted for a healthcare or a medical facilities, specifically via digital marketing segment, which is a lot of intricacies involved, unlike the FMCG or any other industry. Thank you, Monish.
So can I get a little more information about when you say healthcare, really, what is it, what kind, the nature of the product, if you don't mind?
I think we'll have to hear from him, right, Akhil. I think I'll move on. Maybe if Monish puts something else, I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Yeah. This is a question from Mr. Vinod. His question is, what can be done to attract talented job seekers to join the organization? The quality of today's job seekers are mediocre compared to global talents. Maybe off the track, but if you have big take on this.
Oh, that's another great question. This is something that all organizations, struggle with. I think the ones that do better are the ones that are able to tell craft more compelling narratives about why you need to join this company. Right? Think of your employer value proposition as another opportunity to do storytelling about what makes you different. And you have to think really hard about it. It's not something that happens just like that. Just simply because I say that my company is a great company to work for, that doesn't mean that you have to build. Right? I need to come back to you with proof points, and content can help you with those proof points. If you come up with stories about why, think of at a very basic level, think of things like testimonials, think of things like what features or benefits your company is offering that might be slightly differentiated from others. Think about the culture. Think about really the kind of work that they may have an opportunity to kind of work on. Or let's say, even if you're in a category where there are lots of competition, are you going after a segment which is a little bit unique?
Absolutely.
All right. So in that sense, and try to tie it back. I'll give you an example of what we're doing with Aegon today. Right. Life insurance, the life insurance sector today has about 23, 24 players. Right. And traditionally, if you take LIC out of that picture, traditionally all of the private insurers have gone after this so-called creamy layer of customers. Okay, salaried, metro audiences. They have all of their paperwork, ITRs, everything filed. So very easy customers, profitable customers. But you are a nation of 1.4 billion people. India has one of the biggest protection gaps when it comes to basic financial security for life insurance. I'm not talking about a savings or a ULIP product. I'm talking about basic term. So if you're the free chief wage earner and you die, right? Most people are underinsured or not insured at all. So families are left in the lurch. They're forced to resort to their savings, sell assets off like land, or they just basically go into some form of distribution. Now, the segment we realized when we were looking at this business that the path to growth is really those customers, the ones who are self-employed, the ones who don't have access to traditional financial, services because they don't have the paperwork to support it. So they've been largely ignored. Now, for us, that became an important story to tell, and we are going out into the market and looking for talent. Because the story is not really about are you selling more insurance. The story then from my recruiter is really like, okay, fine. Do you care about creating a more equitable financial future for all Indians? Do you want to work with a business where every household could be financially secure? Right? Those are the kind of products we're trying. We're not just talking about them. So those are genuinely the kind of products that we're trying to design. But generally the kind of markets that we're trying to serve. So you need to go back to your business and start thinking about, okay, fine, what is it that makes me different and unique? Content can be an extremely useful resource in that sense when clubbed with your employee value proposition and taken to market. Because the way that you recruit, I don't think that's an issue with. I'll be very genuinely honest. We're a relatively small player amongst much larger incumbents. If I just look at my brand versus others, right? But we're able to attract really good talent largely on the back of really how we try to differentiate ourselves, the kind of problems that we're trying to work on, the product we're trying to design, the culture that we have, and the opportunity that we give people. If you are small and lean, right, you get to do more things. You're not very stratified as an organization.
Absolutely.
So think of your company from that perspective. There's not a talent dearth. It's really you have to start thinking about how can I make myself more attractive to the talent that is available.
Great. We have last two questions for today evening, Akhil. Last but one is from Mr. Keshav Pandey. His question is, like to know what will be the best content for QSR brand like KFC or Pizza Hut? Any example on how to increase brand popularity? Thank you, Keshav.
Think of the moments when somebody is coming to your brand, somebody is engaging with your brand, right? I mean, there are a lot of, I talked earlier about emotions, on the role that emotions play when it comes to, you thinking about a brand. A brand at the end of the day is just a feeling, right? It's a representative of what I think, what I feel when I think about a brand. If you're doing QSR, really, what are those spaces? Are people coming to that QSR? Is it joy? Is it a feeling of togetherness? Right? How can you take those emotions and leverage that through content? It doesn't have to be people coming and eating at your restaurant, right? It could be other feelings of, just basically taking that feeling and trying to figure out the spaces where you can just make it relevant. You can use pop culture as a reference. You could use family values or family ties. You could just be catching up with friends, figuring out really what you stand for and really what's relevant to them, what ties into their sense of identity, right? I think that makes a big difference, and it would also help. Okay, like as the content at the end of the day is remember this content is to help you build that brand, but that brand has to be able to deliver that experience. If your content is telling a story that's not necessarily, uh, that doesn't necessarily match the expectation. I mean, your brand doesn't match the expectation that your content story is telling, then there is a gap, right? So you will get really then you're chasing vanity metrics. You're getting more views, you're getting more likes and shares for that piece of content. You may say, oh, it went viral. Is it having a business impact? Maybe, right? So look, you have to be able to be willing to think through the entire.
The last question for today evening, Akhil, is from Mr. Deepak. His question is how to do content marketing for industrial products like CNC machines. Thank you, Deepak. Very interesting one.
Yeah, no. So I mean, like honestly, going back to the thing about how do the customer who's buying your product, even where does he get his information from? Who does he talk to? Right? Does he read a journal? Does he talk to traders, or I mean, to the dealers in the space? Does he talk to? Uh, I know what are the factors that are really important to him? Is it cost? Is it reliability? When I say cost, I'm not talking about just cost of buying the machine, but the entire cost of ownership, right? Uh, uh, think of really what capabilities that CNC machine has versus others. How can I start generating, piece of content around that? I think one of the big things that at least in the B2B space that I've seen that the buyers focus a lot on impact. What is the impact to my business in terms of sales? Either it's helping me save money, or it's helping and save time, or that's one way to talk about it. The other way is to talk about this is how much potential you are going to unlock, right? You make an investment in this CNC machine. Say today you're using XYZ CNC machine or no CNC machine. Now this CNC machine is expensive, but this is going to help you go from X revenue company to XX revenue company, right? By having these machines. So, and how can you reinforce that? I don't know enough about your business, so I'm just giving a very high level answer at this stage. But really, start thinking about it from that perspective, right? Put your customer, and regardless whether it's B2B or B2C, put your customer at the center of your strategy and think like, how can I influence him? And then the ideas will start to come. Okay, one thing I didn't talk about enough here is I don't know how many of you are using generative AI. When I talk about generative AI, whether it's a Bard, whether it's a ChatGPT, whether it's a DALI, whether it's or a Midjourney, I think the fact that these tools exist, okay, is a huge move for marketers like us. Not because we are trying to outsource thinking, but because we are trying to test ideas, right? I am a big advocate of using tools like these to test our ideas. Okay, but remember, it's an input and output model, which means that the more detailed your input is, the better the quality of the output that you're going to get. So if I come up with a really detailed question and maybe a number of follow-up questions after that, the kind of response that I get just jumps up in terms of the quality. So one of the things my teams and I always push my teams to do is that, okay, fine, when we are brainstorming, we do our brainstorming in person, right? Then we come up with a strategy, then we go and we say, okay, fine, I need a way to now go and see if there are any holes in the strategy. So I go and I put that strategy into a generative AI tool and I say, okay, fine, what are are there any spaces that I'm missing or any refinements that I can? So I'm not outsourcing my thinking, but basically what I'm doing is I'm looking for any things that I could not have thought of already. Right. So it becomes as one more person in that room who's helping me with the brainstorm. And for your content needs also, I would suggest start thinking of how generative AI can help you get more effective. Right? Do you need to spend, I don't know, 2 days, one day writing a brief, briefing your agency, getting your agency to come back with ideas? Or do you say, okay, fine, if I'm doing something like social media, I don't need a 3-4 days sort of turnaround. I have a bunch of ideas already. Okay. Now give me ideas of how to visualize Mr. Generative AI and tell my agency, just visualize these ideas. That's it. Right? You will reduce the turnaround time on a lot of your basic operational tasks. And it frees up your intellectual capital to think of higher order things. So I didn't get into that earlier, but yeah, this is something that's
Thank you so much. And I think we have already passed 60 minutes after 7 o'clock. Akhil, thank you so much. I think quite engrossing. And I think, sorry, Atish, we couldn't address your question because we really overshot the time. But you can catch up with Akhil on any other platform. But thank you so much, Akhil, from all of us for taking us through, I mean, very big canvas in terms of the content. I think, right from advertising and connecting with the brand building and with some of the finest stories across the globe, not just from India. I think that made all the difference. And with all the anecdotal evidence that you could very easily quote, I think that was very engaging. Thank you so much from all of us, and absolute pleasure having you. And look forward to hosting you sometime later, or maybe with another interesting episode on the content marketing. I'm sure as it evolves, I think there's so much to talk about.
No, so thanks to everyone who tuned in and for your question. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but yeah, feel free to take my details from Dr. Chowdhury and reach out to me directly. So I'm very happy to engage with each of you who have questions on this topic. And thank you, Dr. Chowdhury, and the entire TimesPro team for allowing me to kind of just share a little bit of my I find that these sessions help me as much as they have the audience, because it forces me to start thinking about really what it is that I've experienced and how does that actually translate into a lesson. So, right. So, I wish everyone a very happy weekend, and yeah, catch you all soon.
Thank you so much once again, Akhil. Thank you so much. Thank all of you, wonderful participants as always. Thank you, Murli. Thank you, everyone.